1 ball, 2 strikes. The pitch. Hey, Cubs win the division. Cubs win the division. Cubs win the division. Look at that scene on the field.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome the one and only Harry Carey.
Thank you, Gary. You all know, thank you. You all know what we're here for, the 7th inning stretch. I know you've been here, you're here from all over the country. There's a chance for them to hear you back home. We're going to sing it, and sing it good and loud, especially loud. A 1, a 2, a 3. Take me out to the ball game.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The episode, the Monday morning quarterback on the 17th of February 2020. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth, and we'll look back at events that occurred and quarterback them. We don't have the talk shows today, but we are quarterbacking Charlie Cook and Amy Walder, and look at their opinion articles on the week, but it was Friday Jobber. We did E.J. Dion. The only one missing is, I believe, Carl Rowe. We'll get him eventually here. We also went in depth with the people at the University of Virginia, Charlottesville. And of course, we honor Herbert Hare, who was killed there by white supremacists. And that's the crystal ball from Larry Sabato. So we're looking at it, and we also had the people from Nate Silver's shop. We went over some of their analytics, and we'll talk a little here about Nevada, and we'll be talking more about Nevada. And we still have in the can a open source report on the application by the Iowa caucus, and also the application or the method being used now by the people in the state of Nevada. They have early voting going on there. The former leader of the Senate, Harry Reid, voted, and he voted non-committed because he knows a number of the people, including Joe Lunchbox, Biden, and various others, and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, etc., Amy Klobuchar, the people that were in the Senate at the time that he was the leader, and all these people would have been in the Senate at that particular time. But what is happening in Nevada, they are using a Google app. And for those that are not familiar with Google and their Google Docs, they have a spreadsheet and a presentation manager and various other items in their suite, which is available to people without cost. And now there is an enterprise version. I know at university we use that particular version that has more things. And the reason universities are able to get Google Docs and the Google Scholar is that they also use Gmail. And they open that up to student body of hundreds of thousands of people involved in that, and that's a trade-off. Google does not charge the university the enterprise license for Google Docs. Now, there is an open source way. We use a LibreOffice suite, which is a free software put out by the Libre people, and it also has a word processor, calculator, etc. Within it. Now, the people in Nevada are using also iPads, which the iPad is a proprietary device, and a more open device, not completely open, is the other pads that are out there that are Android, and they are the majority in the world. What is going on there is these devices, the Android pads, etc., the information by and large is in the cloud. You can have external drives there, for your work product if you wish, but it's primarily a cloud operation, very inexpensive. And for those that recall, at one time at the Open Source Report, we sponsored the $100 notebook, our laptop, or whatever you want to call it. It had an AMD processor in it, and it is gone, but it was primarily aimed at the developing world, in particular on the African continent. And the thing about it was it had applications there that you could use without connecting to the internet. It also had a crank system that you could crank up to use for energy. Didn't want to get off on this, but back to the people in Nevada, they have their early voting, which you can go to any place in a county, for instance, Clark County, that's Las Vegas, or up in Reno, Carson City, where their capital is, whatever county that is. You can go there, and they have locations where you can vote early. And once the early voting is completed, then those results will be forwarded to the caucus sites next week. I believe it's next Saturday, a week from this Saturday, or is it this Saturday? Anyway, we'll get that precise date for you on when it occurs. They have a debate in Las Vegas. I believe it's maybe in Reno, but anyway, in Nevada, this Wednesday they have that, and I believe they do have it on Saturday. We should know these dates out there, and we do have some polling from Nevada. The Las Vegas Review, I believe, has it, and we have information also from Mr. Ralston, which has the Nevada Independent. We have some of that information available there. Some number of articles have been written. The Culinary Workers Union, a very large union in Las Vegas and in Nevada as a whole, which is a multiracial operation. But what happened there was that they did not endorse Medicare for All, which is the center of Bernie Sanders' campaign, and to a certain extent Liz Warren. And that did not go well with Bernie's supporters in Nevada. So there is a conflict there. And what happens is that, and we've seen this situation when you have a special interest involved, that trade unions negotiate various things, including health care. It's the same with GM and the automobile industry. And many times their policies are different and tend to be more robust than a normal policy. Say, for instance, you could buy on the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act exchange, and that many of these businesses offer there as part of their negotiation. So those are little side issues that you would have in Medicare for All, and they will be resolved over time. One has to understand that Medicare for All is not something that would be passed by the Congress on day one of the first few weeks of 2021. It's an evolutionary process, would take 3 or 4 years, more than likely much more than 3 or 4 years to bring into fully effect it, and they would in the process shore up the Affordable Care Act and move towards a single payer. Now there are various elements out there. At this mic, what we see is a situation whereby the economy at a particular time in history will determine much of what, in terms of how we go to a single P, and we say we in a very generic sense in the U.S. For instance, now we have the COVID-19 virus, as it's called, and it is in many nations. A number of Americans were evacuated Sunday, and now they have arrived at Travis Air Force Base in California from the Princess cruise line there. There were roughly 340-something Americans on there, and we're not certain of the number that have arrived at Travis, and some others will be arriving at a base in Air Force Base in Texas, and they will be quarantined for 14 days. Now, the running agreement was with the Japanese government. They're off of the coast there in Japan, that on the 19th, today is the 17th, that the quarantine would be lifted, and now that has become a little bit dodgy in that they have said, this is they, the Japanese authorities, that unless the people are sick or have been the sick of being evacuated to Japanese medical facilities, but those that say were in a cabin or in close proximity of a sick person could stay on the ship longer, and that in itself creates an unfortunate health hazard. You had roughly from the beginning was about 4,000 people or so, a little more than that there, and up to the latest number 350 or so, and counting up. People have various stages of COVID-19 virus. Some are more sick than others. So those people could stay behind. The World Health Authorities and other people that deal with this and it's quite obvious that precautions taken by the Japanese authorities with a cruise ship having that many people on it and in that type of proximity is a recipe for disaster. It should have never happened. They should have evacuated the people off of that to medical facilities, or at least to facilities in hotels, wherever, that they would not be in as close proximity to each other, because on the ship they say that the air is not being recirculated, but that's a bit dodgy within itself. And many of the people on cruise ships are elderly or older than the general population, and that is one of the things that we know. So no doubt medical epidemiologist types will be studying that particular situation, because the ship has the largest concentration of COVID-19 people than any place except in China, the Hunan area there, that have more people. And the latest up count there, and we've been modeling this at Crest Analytics, is 70,000. We think that, at least our thinking is that the particular virus will reach over 100,000 of people before it's all said and done. And roughly 1,800 people have now died from the virus. And that is only an estimate. It is not to say, well, 1,800 people have definitely died. No, there's always in this situation, depending on how it's counted, depending on obviously the deaths that are attributed to it, more people there, and it obviously will be more people affected with it. And let's start the report off here. Something we've been working on is a novel out here called American Dirt, and it's a novel about Mexicans by a writer who is not. And this is the only situation here that stands out. This novel, in fact, even the tour had been suspended. Let's get into it here. This is Jenny Cummings was word she had no business writing American Dirt. She was born in the U.S. of mixed Irish and Puerto Rican ancestry. She feared that she was unqualified to tell a story of a migrant journeying through Mexico, or Mexico as it would be. I wish someone slightly browner than me would have written it. Cummings said in a note at the end of the novel. It's her fourth book. I've not heard of her, but that doesn't really matter. But then I thought, if you're a person who has the capability to be a bridge, why not be a bridge? So she began the commercial. The resulting effort became one of the year's buzziest literary titles, landing her 7-figure contract, advanced praise, and a movie deal. On Tuesday, Oprah Winfrey, and she's known for books, said that she had selected American Dirt for her sale-boosting a book club. In recent days, however, a growing number of Mexican Americans and other Latinos have spoken out against Cummings, accusing her of appropriating a story that they say is not hers to tell and writing it for a largely European audience with stereotypes and cliches to show. American Dirt follows Lydia, a middle-class Mexican bookseller, and her 8-year-old son. Lucas, after drug cartel murders much of her family in Acapulco, Mexico, a place that used to be known for cartels. The two are forced to embark on a treacherous journey north that has been hailed as a grapes of wrath of our time. Chicano writer Mayan Gabriel called it Frankenstein of a book, a clumsy and distorted spectra. American Dirt fails to convey any Mexican sensibility. As she says, she wrote on the website Topics of Meta. It aspires to be a Daedalus Muertos instead, but it embodies a Halloween. David Bowles, another Chicano writer, accuses Cummings of borrowing too heavily from other works about immigration and the border instead of whitewashing those themes through the lens of what he calls trauma-prone melodrama. Neither Cummings nor publicist immediately responded to requests for comment. American Dirt has received praise from a number of celebrated Latin writers, including Enrique L. Sanchez, Julia Alvarado, and best-selling author Sandra Ciceres called it the novel Las America, and the international story of our time. Yet controversy around Cummings' novel has also revealed a perennial debate in the literary world over whether and how writers can tell stories about identities they don't know firsthand. Born in a naval base in Spain, Cummings was raised in Gettysburg, Maryland, graduated from a nearby Towson University, never heard of it. She grew up with a Puerto Rican grandmother. Her Irish roots were a strong influence. She lived in Belfast, and her early work was set in Ireland, according to the Baltimore Sun. In a 2015 op-ed in the Times, she said she grew up identifying and being perceived as European. She calls it white. I don't want to write about race, she wrote in the Times. I'm terrified, of striking the wrong chord of being vulnerable or uncovering a shameful ignorance in my psyche. I'm afraid of being misinterpreted. When she decided to write a novel about immigration and the border, that apprehension led her to conduct an extensive research. She said she made multiple trips to Mexico and to interview immigrants seeking a refuge in shelters along the border. Lawyers who represented unaccompanied children, deportees forced out of the U.S., and family members left behind. Cummings also consulted with Norma Iglesias Beto, Professor Chicano and Chicano Studies at San Diego State University, who encouraged the author to pursue the novel despite her limited personal experience with immigration. Judy, we need every voice we can to tell the story, the professor said English Pristo told the LA Times that everybody has a right about a particular topic, even if you are not part of the community. Yet Cummings' author's notes was in a way a present about the criticism. When I decided to write this book, she wrote, I worried about my privilege would make me blind to certain truths and that I'd get things wrong, as may well have. Lately, the question has been a tricky one for many in the literary world. An Australian novelist who is a European novelist, Lionel Shaver, amongst other writers, have landed in hot water for what she had called a fantastic identity politics. On the other hand, Jonathan Frenzel, who is also a European, has been criticized for saying that he doesn't write about race because he lacks first-hand experience on the subject matter. Regardable, although I'm butchering the name here, is not so much about who wrote the book as about how it was written. American Dirt, she says, reflects a portrayal of Medico that was more of a flattened caricature, leaning into the white savior trope than anything true to Gerba's Gurba own lived experience. Nobody's going to rip a pen out of Joanne Cummings' hand. Gerba told the Post in an interview. But if you write a trash, racist story, people are going to criticize you. You do it and be willing to take the heat. She points to a number of scenes in the book that seem off. For instance, she said Lydia, the protagonist, is shocked to discover a skating rink in Mexico City, even though a middle-class character like her should be well acquainted with such an acquisition. In Acapulco, Lydia's bookshop, is frequented more by American tourists than Mexican residents. While Mexican writers have been telling stories about immigration for decades, Gubra said the industry has praised and promoted books by other authors instead. Now, that's not unusual there, and in some cases because publishers and critics fail to see the shortcomings of titles like American Dirt. A study from children's book publisher Lee and Lowe found that 79% of professionals in the publishing industry were Europeans, that nearly 9 out of 10 book reviewers identify as Europeans. It is unclear how the study might classify people like Cummings, who says she identifies as a European and a Latino. We have been writing these stories, Gabra said, but people don't pay attention because we are not European, or they use white. European is more appropriate here, we feel. Anyway, the answer is not complex. It is racism. Let me just get the date on this. We've had this sitting on the desk for a while now, and this is appreciated by the Washington Post for bringing it out. It is a clear situation here. They call it Morning Mix section. This is by Tio Armas, is the writer here, and this goes back almost a month ago, the 22nd of January 2020. Anyway, let's go with some polling now, as we normally do here, where people know that we are in the polling game, and we'll go to real clear politics and get some polls. We have an Arkansas poll here. We don't want to not forget to bring it out. Talk poll. Some of this we already brought out, but we just will do the Las Vegas Review one here. This has Bernie Sanders up at 25, and Joe Lunchbox Biden at 18, and Liz Warren at 13, Tom Steyer at 11, and Little Petey at 10, and Amy Klobuchar at 10. They're all grouped up together here. At least 3 of them are. It's anyone's contest there. Will be of interest to see where Amy Klobuchar lands here. Tom Steyer has been running a lot of commercials in Nevada, and Little Petey has set up his organization there. But Amy Klobuchar is out in places like Carson City. She's working the rural areas, which would be her strength. And as we go to South Carolina, this is another Biden place. He's up by 28 to 20 over Bernie. And Tom Steyer is at 14 there. The others also ran, I suppose you'd say. Liz Warren, Little Petey, and Amy Klobuchar at 8 or 7. There. And now then we go to Texas, a very large state here. Texas Tribune. Bernie is at 2 points. That's a statistical tie there with Joe Lunchbox Biden. And then you have Liz Warren at 15, and Bloomberg appears in this poll at 10, and Little Petey at 7, and Amy at 3, and Tulsi Gabbard at 2. Yang has disappeared here. And on to Georgia. This is a state that Bernie is way ahead. He's at 32, and Bernie is at 14. Bloomberg is at 14. The others are in single digits. And then we go to the St. Pete poll, in Florida. The reason we bring this poll back up once again is that Joe Lunchbox Biden is at 27, Bloomberg at 26, Bloomberg at 27, Bernie and Amy Klobuchar at 9 and 10 respectively, and Little Petey actually is up a point on them. He is at 11, but that shows the conservatism that you have in Florida. Now we go to this Texas Tribune poll. Bernie is only behind old DJ Trump by 2 points, 47 to 45, and Little Petey is behind 5. And Bloomberg is also behind 5. Amy Klobuchar, a surprise here, is behind 5 points. That is a state, Texas, she'd run well in. No doubt about that. She and Bernie both. We don't know. And Joe Lunchbox Biden is doing well. He's only behind by 4. So that sort of shows what's going on here. Let me just move along here a little bit. We looked before at the St. Pete poll. I think we have it. Wait a minute, let me just... this is in Arkansas. We had this poll the other day. Poll Bloomberg holds Slim Lynn on a logjam in Arkansas. This is a News Talk poll. Mr. Roby Block is writing this particular article here, and let's get on down and get to it. Okay, ladies, talk business, and Hendrix College asked 496 likely Democratic primary voters statewide for their purposes. This is the March 3rd. They are on Super Tuesday. This poll was conducted the 6th through 7th with a margin of error plus or minus 4.3, which is fairly standard. There are a number of candidates on the ballot in Arkansas running for Democratic nomination at the election to run today. Which did you vote for? 14.4% for Bernie Sanders, 4.8% Amy Klobuchar, 15.5% for Little Petey, and Andrew Yang, he's gone, he got 2%. Elizabeth Warren got 8.9%. And Bloomberg at 19.6. Joe Lunchbox Biden right behind him at 18.5. He would do well in Arkansas. So this is an interesting situation in the state of Arkansas and where Tom Steyer is. And 3 weeks to go. There's a certain fluid race, turnout amongst younger voters, older, and our African American voters who rearranged the final position for all these candidates. That is from Roby Block, Talk of Town editor there. I think the logjam at the top is pretty representative of what we're seeing nationally. There's no clear front runner. Arkansas has 36 delegates in the Democratic primary process. It's not a winner-take-all. Party rules state that any candidate above 15% vote will be given a percentage. From Dr. Barth, J. Bart, Emeritus Professor of Political Science at Hendrix College, helped craft and analyze the latest poll. He offers his analysis of the results. Now, we have not went to Arkansas yet. In the race, there are 4 candidates within 4 points at the head of this survey. Several things stand out in the race for the lead in the Arkansas Democratic primary. First, this is one of the first state polls in which Michael Bloomberg has been a legitimate candidate. While other candidates have had major national coverage, Bloomberg has had the airwaves to himself in Arkansas. As is seen, hundreds of thousands ads spent by the former mayor of New York has at least equaled the national media coverage for the 3 leading other candidates, i.e. Mr. Lunchbox Biden, Sanders, and Mayor Pippin. Second, all 4 just are at or above the magic number in the Democratic primary to gain delegates. They must reach the 15% threshold. All 4 of these candidates hit the number, suggesting if all are in the race on the 3rd of March, the 36 votes will be split up. Third, while voter turnout is always a key to determining the electoral outcome, the composition of the Arkansas electorate on the 3rd will truly determine the winners and losers in that race. If skewed as younger and younger than the Clinton-Sanders primary, the Vermont senator might be able to eke out a victory. If it breaks towards older voters, then Bloomberg is advantaged with voters very dependent upon traditional TV advertising for their information. Similarly, Joe Lunchbox Biden is advantaged if the electorate is heavily African American. Finally, the list of candidates on the ballot on the 3rd will be a long one, but we don't know which ones will still be legitimate ones on that date. If the candidates were to drop out to free up the situation, in particular if Liz Warren or Amy Klobuchar were to leave the race. Amy Klobuchar will not leave the race, and I don't think Liz Warren will either. She says she has money to get to March the 3rd, and no doubt will. Now, how she does, I don't know. The general election in Arkansas will be a yonder as both sides write off the state electoral vote to DJ Trump. The next 3 weeks will be a violent one for the state airways with door knockers and candidates' visits. Enjoy it while it lasts. Robert Kuhn, managing partner with Impact Management Group, also helped craft and analyze the poll. He offered this analysis of the results. The Democratic race for President of Arkansas is very competitive, with roughly 4 percentage points separating the top 4 candidates. Bloomberg leads the field with the broadest appeal amongst voters of all age, while taking a 1 in 3 voters over 65. This is a key right there, older voters. And how far does this go? In addition to 8 fault lines emerge on race and ethnicity, 41% of African Americans support Joe Lunchbox Biden in this survey, followed by Bloomberg at 17 and Bernie at 11. Bloomberg leads amongst European voters at 20%, followed by Little Petey, and this has pretty much been out there. And then comes Bernie. Men were more favorable to Bernie, 25%. 17% went for Little Petey, while Liz Warren and Joe Biden benefited from marginally higher support from women. Bloomberg also was relatively even amongst women and men, while the candidates will start pivoting for their focus towards Super Tuesday, states like Arkansas in the coming days increasing ad bias. Bloomberg is already there, maximizing voter contest. The composition of the Democratic Party will have a major impact on the end results. Higher African American turnout will boost Joe Biden's chances, as well as Bloomberg to a lesser degree, while the increase in younger voters would be a clear advantage to Bernie. Historically, the Democratic Party has leaned more female than male. Should that trend continue, the big winners will be Biden, Bloomberg, Warren, with Sanders and Buttigieg conceding ground. Now, that's kind of interesting analysis there. We reread it. Should the trend continue in 2020, the big winners would be Biden, Bloomberg, and Warren. Now, he does not mention Amy Klobuchar here. Let me just get this number here. My feeling would be it would benefit her, but where is she in the... Well, she's at 4.8% there. It would be definitely Bernie at 16, Bloomberg at 19.6, Joe Biden. So that's the three there. And then Liz Warren coming in, we'll call it about 8 points. So in other words, that puts... Amy Klobuchar in fifth place. Is the reason that he and the others have excluded her. But this is the take from Arkansas. So we've looked at Arkansas, and let's take a station break here, and we'll go to Charlie Cook. We're running not too bad here. WBRN Radio. Hold on. Okay, let's get South Carolina in here. This is the fall of New Hampshire. This is the latest ECU poll. I think this is East Carolina University. Shows Joe Lunchbox Biden at 28, followed by Bernie Sanders at 20, and Tom Steyer, I hope I'm pronouncing his name, at 14, Little Petey at 8, and Amy Klobuchar at 8, and Liz Warren. They're all ganged up together here with Buttigieg, and this was taken actually the 12th through 13th of February, and 703 plus or minus standard 123 here. Amongst likely voters who are African American, Joe Lunchbox Biden leads Bernie Sanders 36-20. Tom Steyer is in third, followed by Liz Warren at 7, Bloomberg at 5, and Little Petey at 4. Amy Klobuchar at 1. This is for African American voters. She had very little exposure to the African American community problem. Amongst 65 and older, it's clearly Joe Lunchbox Biden. He's got 47% there, and leading over Bloomberg, who has 10. Bernie has 8. Well, Amy Klobuchar shows up at 8, does better with, and Tom Steyer at 8. They're all at 8, and Little Petey. For those under the age of 35, it's clearly Bernie Sanders. He's at 36, and Tom Steyer's at 21. Liz Warren's at 14. Joe Biden's at 13. They're kind of all banged up together here, and Amy Klobuchar doesn't show up. There's a generational divide amongst likely voters who are African Americans. For those who are 55 or older, Joe Biden leads with 49%. Followed by Tom Steyer. And what happens, Tom Steyer has invested in African American-owned media and newspapers, radio, etc. There, Bloomberg has 8%, Bernie 7, and Amy Klobuchar at 1. And amongst African Americans, 54 and under is Bernie Sanders at 29%. Then Joe Lunchbox Biden at 26%. And here comes Tom Steyer, because he's been targeting these people at 23%. Little Petey at only 3%, and Amy Klobuchar didn't show up. But again, this poll was conducted the 12th through 13th, fairly recent here. Sample consists of likely Democratic voters, 703 in South Carolina, and we said again that it was 4.3%. Either way, the data was weighted by age, education, race, gender, mode, and 2016 election modeling based on race and age, carried with them a higher margin of error due to a small sample. Data was collected using both the interactive voice response system of landlines only. That was 365 there, and online a panel provided by Lucid. That was 338. And Bloomberg is not on the ballot in South Carolina. However, he is vying for the nomination, given that the South Carolina primary is still 2 weeks away, and that voters may have been aware of his absence on the ballot. We decided to measure the level of support. For those who disagree with that decision, we've analyzed the poll resulting with Bloomberg excluded from the analysis. Now, Joe Biden's lead over Sanders remains 8 points, 30-22, followed by Tom Steyer at 15, Little Petey at 9, Amy Klobuchar at 7, and Elizabeth Warren. You're seeing kind of a trend here, but Elizabeth Warren is indeed tied up with Amy Klobuchar there. It's not good for Liz Warren in the sense that Liz Warren will no doubt go through Nevada into South Carolina and on to Super Tuesday. And what happens to Liz Warren after Super Tuesday? If she doesn't do any better, she will, as they say, as LBJ would say, go to the proverbial house. And that would be what you would say if you were in her home state of Oklahoma, according to the late great Jerry Pippin. Anyway, nonetheless, let's get to at least Charlie Cook, we hope. Oh boy, just a second here. We need to get that up and away, as they say, and we'll at least get Charlie in here in the mix and get some analysis from Charlie Cook. In our opinion, the best handicapper in America, the Cook Report. He appears on C-SPAN and various other places, and let's get to him. Eventually here. Now this is Michelle Riddell's. This is from on Nevada. We'll have Amy Klobuchar campaigned in Reno at the Boys and Girls Club facility in Reno, Nevada. This was on Friday, and this is Nevada Independent. This is the one by Mr. Ralston. Most of attention trained on Iowa, and Klobuchar has been late to step up in Nevada, cozy to voters in the Silver State, on the heels of better expected third place in New Hampshire. More than 1,000 voters packed a stuffy Boys and Girls Gym in Reno. That was Friday afternoon. She spoke to the people as signs of an unseasonably warm day, cheered on moderate positions such as the Affordable Care Act instead of Medicare for All. I know it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, Klobuchar said after zeroing out a number of centralist positions, but it's certainly not a pipe dream. It's a plan with a deadline. She's talked about this. She ousted care districts that ousted Michelle Bachmann. You remember Michelle Bachmann was a candidate at one time for president, no longer there. And Bernie Sanders takes an edge in the race. Klobuchar's case that she wants to scare voters away, scare away moderate Republicans. Won a district anyway. This is one of the things here. We can't just eke out a victory at 4 a.m., as sweet as that would be. Klobuchar said we have to win big to get stuff done. Well, no doubt about that. She's working on it. And we'll see how she gets big stuff done. And some comments from various people here that 65-year-old Reno resident who held a green Amy sign over her head for part of the speech said she thinks that the best future president would be someone who doesn't have this over-exaggerated idea of the role of a president in a system of checks and balances. Very thought out statement there. Anyway, it's one of the tendencies people, and it's a picture here of people. Maybe we'll include this in our little thing deal here. Anyway, the debate, I guess the MSNBC debate, that'll be on Wednesday on unfortunately. This is one of the problems also. Corporate media taking up the debates and pushing them out to the people when we used to have the League of Women Voters do this stuff. Now we don't have them anymore. It's a sad situation here. This, I guess, was the poll here. New poll shows Sanders leading there. Democratic Sanders said hold a rally in Central Plaza. That was in downtown Reno on Wednesday. It was back in May. For the first time since September last year, Bernie Sanders is leading a pack. This is at Las Vegas Review poll, AARP Nevada poll out here. I think we talked about 25% picking Bernie Sanders, self-described Democratic socialists. They're getting the word out. 7-point gap there between he and Joe Lunchbox Biden. Liz Warren trails in third with 13%, with 11% going to the billionaire Tom Steyer. And Amy Klobuchar at 10, Little Petey at 10, a virtual tie there. And Bloomberg won't be on the ballot in Nevada, but he's somewhere around in the woodpile, so to speak. Anyway, that is a debate coming up there. And let's see if we can get to Charlie Cook. He's writing on the 14th of February, and this is to be the last one here. Democrats should temper their disappointments. One of the most amazing things about politics is how binary people tend to be in their thinking, whether it's is partisan or true believers, independents or political reporters. Things are often either wonderful or horrible in any given for any given party or candidate. Gladiations in and between important distinctions or changing circumstances are not to be bothered with. The Washington Post is a columnist there, Karen Tumbley, I suppose, whom I think very highly of, wrote the other day that Democrats should worry about the mediocre turnout in the Iowa caucus. It's roughly the same 170,000 who attended in 2016, but less than 240 from 2008 when Barack Obama won. Another word for turnout might be normal. We shouldn't use a baseline for comparing a caucus that is on that had unprecedented turnout, featuring elected candidates like President Obama, also Hillary Clinton and John Edwards, in a freeway photo finish for the second place there. Remember, John Edwards is now a successful trial lawyer once again. Anyway, that was that story there, but Hillary Clinton and John Edwards, anyway. Democrats are also sorely disappointed over President Trump's acquittal in the impeachment trial. Well, they knew that was coming. But should this outcome really have been a surprise to anyone? The effect never has the slightest chance of success, the effort, and for which meant that 20 Republican senators joining 47 Democrats to reach 67, that was a magic number, and remove old DJ Trump from office. To undertake the most divisive action in the American government, to remove a president from office by a vote in Congress without strong public support with less than a year to go before the same president faced voters, was always a fool's errand. I agree. Even worse, it was bound to overshadow Democratic presidential candidates' messaging and feed into Trump's grievance. If you noticed, DJ Trump has been following the Democrats around. He'll be in Nevada, I believe in Las Vegas, hold a big so-called rally. That'll be the day before the Democrats vote in their primary. Not the early voting, but the actual voting. He did the same thing in New Hampshire. He showed up to try to get some cheap publicity. There's another matter of President's job approval rating, which moved up to 49 in Gallup. The high watermark of Trump's presidency is absolutely seen to be the case that the president's approval rating in most major polls is now in the top of his rating range. The polling average for his approval rating, that's done by Real Clear Politics, and 538, show an uptick, but certainly not a surge. Gallup, in fact, is the only poll so far that showed him breaking from his range. Has been between 35 and 46 so far in his term. There should be plenty of national polls conducted after, and they have been conducted. He's back. DJ is back in the 43s. And when I was a young pollster, I learned that one poll wasn't a trend. You wait for several, comparing polls with previous ones, that the same polling organization using the same methodology. After all, there is a house effect. Each poll makes apples to apples comparison more prudent. Anyway, no doubt about that. So, and we go here. Let's see, Democratic president's messaging. Yeah, we talked about messaging. Messaging is kind of an interesting, we'll talk about it in a minute here. Don't get me wrong, this presidential election, at least in the electoral college level, the only part that matters is going to be close, really close, but until we know who the Democrats nominate, none of this other stuff really matters a lot. So far, there's only one question throughout the Trump presidency that he has major impact. Do people love or loathe him? Other factors such as economic performance. That's back to Professor Amowitz there. The war with China. Peace with Democratic Republic of Korea was an offering. Foreign policy was in tatters. Debate over gun violence. Climate change has never seemed to matter. And that's true. It's one of the things you always look at in the crosstabs. Where is climate change? Well, climate change just hasn't gotten there. People love that Trump in February and March, pretty much still do. Those who love him, they still pretty much do. Few minds have changed. So, it is now, no matter which side of the aisle you are on, given the impervious Trump numbers have been to news events and developments, take a deep breath is well advised. This is written in the National Journal on the 11th of February by Mr. Cook, Charlie Cook. Well, it's out there, and I think we'll end at this rate here. We're still working on that open source report, and that'll be open source elections plus the shadow. We'll bring in Nevada. We'll finish that up, talking about elections there. We also have Numbers Man. We're just about finished with Numbers Man report that's this week in economics, and we'll get that out in the next day or so. Nonetheless, have a good week. This is Boston Red, the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. Good day.